This is Charles Barkley, and you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends. Tim, this is your last favor. Anything else is going to cost you.
CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Hi, this is Jeff Glor from CBS News, and you're wasting your precious time with Tim Graham and Friends.
Thanks for tuning in to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with my co-host Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. Later on in the podcast, we are going to be joined by Gene Kershner. He is the horse racing writer for the Buffalo News and one of the best in the business, and that is on the planet. You can follow him at Equispace. So we have some analysis coming up for you later regarding the second leg of the Triple Crown. Preakness coming up. Mystik Dan going for perhaps a Triple Crown. The field has been cleared a little bit with the favorite Muth scratch this week. We'll get into that with Gene. Jonah, the big news of the week, of course, in Western New York. The NFL releases the schedule, so now everybody knows which order the Bills will be facing their opponents, when to book your travel, and of course the Buffalo Bandits have advanced and are on the verge of another NLL championship. That begins tomorrow. Where do you want to start, Jonah? I'll leave it up to you.
I say we start with the Bills schedule in the NFL schedule, because here we are recording this around noon on Thursday. The schedule was announced 16 hours ago, and it feels like such old news already, with all of the predictions going into it and the leaks and the games that were announced ahead of time. And then so many live reactions that I saw, and even, had to write something myself last night for WIBB.com. It's a day later, and it feels like, not a second day story, but a third day story to even get into it. But if there's people out there that only get their sports news from TGAF, here we are to preside it for them.
Well, I'm not going to go through the schedule. No, so you're not going to learn the schedule at Tim Graham and Friends, but we'll give us some analysis as to what we think. If it's good for the Bills that they are front-loaded. I mean, front-loaded. Yikes. Weeks 2 through 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Weeks 2 through 6 are dastardly. But things loosen up for them a little bit down the stretch. That could be good for them, unless, of course, they're so lumped up by then that they're trying to keep their heads above water. We could talk about that. But regarding the release of the schedule, the other thing about it for us here in Western New York, regarding the Bills, they have so many primetime games that they get released by their broadcast arms. So Amazon's letting us know this game, and Peacock is releasing this game. So they have these entities that the NFL gives permission to but declare these games. So you were able to figure out the Bills' schedule a couple hours, maybe even multiple hours, more than two, a few hours, before the Bills got around to posting at 8 o'clock. Oh, we could talk about these schedule release videos too. I don't know if it's going to be a quick aside or we're going to talk about them for a while. I don't know what your thoughts are on them. Some are great. Some are really lousy. The Bills was interesting to me. The Bills did a spoof of Parks and Rec. So I have, it's a mixed bag for me. I don't know what your thoughts were on the Bills video, Jonah. We haven't talked about it yet. I think Josh Allen is a great actor, and I think it's in his blood. His dad was involved in theater quite a bit in high school, and I think even in college. And he seems to be just a natural when it comes to acting. And I thought it was very well done, well produced. The problem is I didn't watch Parks and Rec. It went over my head. I had no idea what they were doing. I guess people who watch Parks and Rec, the show, loved it. So it's funny what the Bills had to decide to do is they had to know that not everybody watched that show. While as popular as it was, not everybody watched that show, and they didn't care. And fine, because the metaphor of the pit was too good to pass up. I guess it was a storyline in Parks and Rec, and the whole pit and the new stadium. And so the people who got it loved it. I was at a loss. I don't know. I have a follow-up thought about schedule release videos and their effectiveness, but I don't want to ramble. What'd you think of the Bills video?
I pretty much the same reaction as you. I've seen some episodes of Parks and Rec, but hadn't watched enough of the show to recognize that was a Parks and Rec spoof right away. So the first time I watched it, I thought it was hilarious because I thought the Bills and Josh Allen had come up with all these pretenses and lines, and I was like, wow, this is, brilliant. This is a great sitcom episode that the Bills just produced. Then when somebody at work told me it was a Parks and Rec scene that they were recreating, I was a little less impressed because, that it's just not as creative to do that. But I'm not criticizing it. I think it was good for what it was. It really did not emphasize the schedule and who they're playing and the teams. And maybe that's not necessary because everybody already knows, but it kind of just seemed like an excuse to do something that Josh Allen thought was fun and funny.
That leads right into my next part. I think a schedule release video should be about releasing the schedule. And the Bills aren't alone in this. I think a lot of teams fell into this trap of we're going to produce a video and the video stands on its own. And then at the end, we're going to show you what the schedule is. This is where the Rams and the Chargers, those videos, the Patriots did a really good job. The Detroit Lions. So here's the thing about the Detroit Lions. Similar in that they go for a TV show type spoof, or I think you should leave is a spoof of itself. It's not a spoof. So it was Tim Robbins releasing the Detroit Lions schedule, and I think it was funny even if you've never seen I Think You Should Leave. You didn't need to have known who these guys were. Fact is, if you're from Detroit, you know who these guys are. They did the show Detroiters after all, but you didn't need to have seen I Think You Should Leave to get the gags. It was funny on its face. The Patriots did a Good Will Hunting send up with Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, and the ever elusive Ernie Adams was in it playing the Robin Williams character. And that was an inside baseball thing. Most people, if you weren't a Patriots fan, you're probably you don't know who Ernie Adams is, but that is an infamous storyline in New England, is that nobody was ever allowed to talk to Ernie Adams or know what he did there. Robert Kraft's in it. It was poorly acted. The acting in it was terrible, but the production was sharp. They released the schedule within it. Chargers and Rams, still the standard. The entire video was releasing the schedule, but it was done in such a slick way from the start, the very beginning. From start to finish, it was releasing the schedule, and it's joke after joke after joke, reference and reference and reference that you didn't need to have seen a show. You just need to be a football fan. And some of them, even for football fans, were kind of obscure because it's layered. Every screenshot might have 3 different references in it. You have to freeze the frame and look on the wall. Or see something in the car, or it was amazing the different approaches that were taken. The Saints also had a bad one that was highly produced, but just poorly executed. Anyways, that was my point, or that was the point I was going to make, is that the schedule release videos have become not about the schedule. It's just like, here's something that we thought we would be funny and maybe go viral, and here's the schedule at the end of it.
Yeah, and they're very referential to online memes, which might make you chuckle if you're really into those online memes. But I think for the larger segment of the audience that maybe doesn't know what meme you're referring to, loses some of that appeal. I mean, I think it's a good social media bit. I don't know if it's necessary that every team needs to turn the schedule release into a social media bit. Or did you watch all 32 of these? Because I would think that would be kind of crazy.
No, I watched, I think I referenced pretty much all the ones I saw. I'm trying to think if there's ones that, I mean, I didn't see, no. I can't think if I'm going through in my mind some of the others.
I wonder if there's a lesson with it that, you know, an underlining point that if the teams are treating this like such a joke, maybe the schedule release isn't such a serious, newsworthy event as it's become year after year. It just seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, everybody was anticipating that the schedule would be released last week, and when it got pushed back by a week, there was reporting as to why that was, and almost like hand-wringing about why is the NFL late with the schedule. And I don't think it's been like that for a few years, but it wasn't that long ago when the schedule would just come out and it would be quickly analyzed after it came out, but it wasn't such a huge media event as it's become in the last 4 or 5 years.
Well,
or so.
I think, Jonah, that it might be a team by team social media event, and that's what the NFL was kind of pivoted towards. The NFL Network has been dying. You know, when I think of the NFL schedule release, I think of people like Andrew Siciliano, you know, behind the anchor desk, and we're going to talk about all the different schedules. Andrew Siciliano doesn't even have a job there anymore. I mean, they have pared that staff down. There's talk of this merger with ESPN where they're going to, and I'm not even sure how that's going to work, but NFL Network just, they're getting out of this line of work of the big news or the announcements and, you know, shows that just go on with, you know, like a Sports Center type format where they give you the news of the day. They're going to do more analysis with Mike Garafolo and Tom Pelissero, Ian Rappaport, that type of stuff, and get away from the anchor with an analyst sitting next to him or her. So maybe it's just the NFL. This is like each team has a chance to, you know, peacock a little bit and show what they can do. And I think that that's where, is it necessary? No, but these teams are competitive and they all have social media staffs. And when you see for the past couple of years, oh shoot, I left out the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans, one of the best last year, maybe the best last year, did a sequel essentially where they talked to people on Broadway in Nashville. I heard some people talking recently that they went to New York City and did it. No, there's Broadway in Nashville. They're doing it in Nashville. And they show the logos of the teams to people who clearly, you know, don't follow football, and it's a good bit. But this idea though, that I think that the other teams or around the league look and see, damn, the Chargers really were good. We want to try that too. So everybody's got a job. Everybody, or hey, if the Chargers are doing that, or the Rams, based, you know, with Hollywood studios right in their backyard, or Robert Kraft with his deep pockets and a bunch of household names like a Rob Gronkowski that you could put in your schedule release video. There are different things that you can do. Hollywood stars that are brought in to do things that the Bills really don't have at their disposal. Yeah, I think it's the competitive nature of being in sports. And I think the front offices are just kind of trying to compete. And maybe it's somebody in a president, a CFO, a CEO, a GM saying, hey man, these guys are doing that. That's fun. How come we can't do that? So the teams try, I think. And some of them are a little shorthanded, especially compared to Los Angeles quality. Not only probably Los Angeles, those people in their backyard, but the people that they can hire. You know, they're hiring people probably on their staff who want to make movies someday. It's the Hollywood, the old Hollywood chestnut of every waiter and barista, has written 4 scripts and is holding out for a chance to both be the lead actor and the director. Hell, maybe everybody in the Chargers and the Rams social media departments graduated from the USC School of Film. Okay, Jonah, thoughts on the schedule and how it broke for the Bills?
You mentioned it earlier, the road games early on, 4 and 5 weeks in the first 6 weeks of the season. I mean, I think the Bills got a very favorable home opener matchup.
I think it's worse that people are saying 4 within the first 6 weeks. I'll break it down like this. They what I think is a gift to start the season against the Arizona Cardinals at home, a team that won 4 games last year. Yes, they're supposed to be better, a terrible defense. This is going to be a way, and again, they can't view it as a 4th preseason game, but a way to get into the season. And then it is 4 primetime games in the next 5 weeks, 4 hard opponents in the next 5 weeks, 4 road games in the next 5 weeks. Or no, 5 out of 5 are hard opponents. 4 of them are primetime games. 4 of them are on the road.
And the game in Houston against Stephon Diggs, which is not a primetime game, but that's going to be an emotionally charged game. And Houston seems to be an up-and-coming team in the AFC, so that's another difficult matchup in that stretch. But the Bills are a first-place team playing a first-place schedule. There was really probably there aren't many configurations of the schedule that would have been much easier than what it was. If they were playing all these games at the end of the season, we'd be talking about the daunting stretch that they had to finish the season with. And if you go by the pattern of the way the Bills have played in recent years, they haven't really struggled at the beginning of the season, but they've had mid-season swoons, and they've come to end the season on winning streaks the last 3 seasons, and the schedule does kind of play into allowing that to happen again. I don't know if that's a preference of the Bills or not. You're going to have to play these road games no matter what, but consecutive road trips, kind of bouncing around the country and playing away from home week after week, there probably will be a schedule loss or 2 for the Bills, where it's a game where maybe if the schedule was made a little bit differently, they'd have a better chance of winning. But I think if you're looking at a final record for the Bills, it's probably the same no matter which way you configure the schedule, if not 1 or 2 games. And it does seem to be a situation where maybe the Bills don't get off to a great start because of those road games, but I don't know how much that changes how they finish.
Yet they have a favorably placed bye in week 12, right in between Kansas City and San Francisco home games. And that also will be a stretch in which they have only 2 road games in a 7-week stretch, and that includes the bye. They're going to go to Los Angeles, to Detroit during that little stretch. That also, and this is a thing that is maybe subtle, but I think it's important, especially for a team that has had some hellacious scheduling, and sometimes because of the weather the last couple of years. They get into a rhythm late in the season, or in fact, from week 7 on, they don't play another non-Sunday game. It's just that Sunday rhythm of what any NFL team really likes to have. Once they get through that gauntlet through week 6, then they get Tennessee Titans at home. That's a breather, I think, coming out of that rough stretch. And from that point on, from week 7 on, they play on Sundays. That means you're back home on Sunday night after a road game, or you're in your own bed and you get your Monday day to come into the facility and get the game plan for the upcoming opponent or go over the film, whatever it is. That Tuesday off, you get in that rhythm. You're done. You don't have to worry about the short rest of a Thursday game coming up, or this game on a Friday, or this game on a Sunday, or the holiday schedule has been cleared off for them this year. There's no threat of a Thanksgiving or Christmas game. So I think that's the thing that stood out to me. Maybe it stood out to me as a as another thing to consider beyond just, hey, what's the tough stretch? When do we get the bye? When do we get the Chiefs? Type thing. That Sunday rhythm, I think, is going to be significant.
Yeah, and from the fan perspective, the 4 primetime games in the first 6 weeks of the season opens up Sundays in September and early October for people who golf or outdoor activities or just kind of enjoying your weekend, where a lot of people build their weekends around NFL football and Bills games. But when the weather's nicer, there's more opportunities to do different things and also enjoy aspects of, a fall Sunday and still get the football game either later that night or on a Monday night, or that Thursday game opens up that weekend. People can go to that game in Miami and then stay in Florida for the rest of the weekend and kind of enjoy that mini vacation. I think there's one more 1 o'clock Sunday game overall in the schedule, and I think 2 more home Sunday 1 o'clock games than there were last year. I think that's kind of good for the normal rhythms and routines of Bills fans and what they like to do. It's good for the team if you're getting a lot of these primetime games, showcases, and holiday games, but the fan experience seems to prefer Sunday 1 o'clock games to be the norm, and it's a few more of those this year than there was last year.
16, 17, 18. Patriots at home, Jets at home, at Patriots. That's an interesting way to conclude the season. Is Aaron Rodgers still going to be on his 2 feet by that point? So the Jets game will be, there's some variables there. The game's at home. The Patriots, a team that is hitting Control, Alt, Delete. I mean, they're not doing a soft reset. They are doing the hard, hold down the power button for 15 seconds, unplug your computer from the wall, and hit, F4 or whatever the hell that button is that you hit to go into the DOS system maybe, and get into your hard drive for a hard reboot. But the Patriots should be a better team. Maybe they've even gone to their rookie quarterback by then, or maybe they've figured some things out. I would like to think that if you're the Bills, they would probably have wanted at least one of those Patriots games early in the season for the free win. And again, that's me talking. I mean, nobody in the NFL is going to talk about a free win, but to have them twice at the end could be a blessing, but it also could be a little bit of a bad break that it happens at the end, that they get a team that's maybe figured a thing out or two.
Yeah, and it's also, for all of the games, a little dangerous is the word that comes to mind, and that's not really what I mean to say. But think about last year. We thought those games against the Broncos and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in midseason would be easy wins for the Bills, and that the schedule would get much harder when they had to play the Chiefs and the Dallas Cowboys and really good teams later in the season. And then when the season came along, that's not necessarily how things played out. So here we are in May. I think it's a little bit foolish to think too much about how easy a Week 15 game is going to be, or how difficult a stretch in December is going to be, because so many things can change with the way teams play, with injuries, and just the rhythm of the Bills season. We've seen them follow this pattern of having kind of a quick start and a midseason swoon and a really strong finish. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to go again, although there's some elements of the schedule that maybe portend to that. But we really got to get to the season. I think, in a way, we should only really be analyzing that opening game and that opening stretch of games, because too many things can happen between now and then to change the analysis of what games are wins and what games are losses this far out.
Great point. Yeah, Russell Wilson to the Broncos, and the NFL loaded up the schedule with all those primetime Broncos games, to the point where it felt like they were playing every Thursday and Sunday night every week. And it was miserable because they sucked. The Jets, you never know what's going to happen. The Jets doing the Jets. And the Texans are another great example. Last year, they were a team hitting the reset button too, just similarly to what I was saying about the Patriots, new coach and all this other stuff. And they figured some things out, and they were a good team.
And Sean McDermott, with his kind of growth mindset, belief, and some of this is rhetoric, but I think he really does believe a lot of it. Maybe having harder games and harder road trips earlier in the season tests the Bills' mettle and gives them some adversity that will make them better in the long run. And even if it costs them a win or two in the win-loss record column early on, that it's better to play the difficult games and the difficult stretch of the season early on, because it'll increase their resolve and resiliency for later on in the season and into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the people who, and maybe even myself, I don't think I did though, but I can't remember back that far. But the analysts and experts and pundits who had declared that the AFC now belonged to the Miami Dolphins because the Bills got off to their rough start, and then the Dolphins score a 1,412 points against Baltimore or whoever the hell it was. Who was it? Who was that game against? I don't even remember. But
It
they
was
scored
against the Broncos, right?
the Broncos, right?
Peyton, yeah.
Yeah, right. The Broncos, not the Raven. And then the Raven. Well, anyways, again, like I said, we're going to get to Buffalo News horse racing writer Gene Kershner here in a little bit. But before we do, Joan, I want to talk to you about the Bandits. You've been covering them all season. Your thoughts on their upcoming series?
Coming into the NL Finals, it's the fourth consecutive finals appearance for the Bandits. That goes back 6 seasons because of 20 and 21 didn't have postseasons in indoor lacrosse. And really what's at stake for the Bandits here is a dynasty. They can win their second consecutive championship, which would be the first time they've done that since their first 2 seasons as a franchise, 92 and 93. It would be their 6th overall championship, which would match the Toronto Rock and the old Philadelphia Wings for the most in league history. The Bandits are already the team that's been to the finals the most time. This will be their 13th trip. And, they have the opportunity to do that. They can, if they were to sweep the series, the best of 3 series, they have the opportunity to win Saturday night at home. They won last year, clinched the series at home in Game 3. That's going to be quite a scene. I think it's going to be close to a sellout at KeyBank Center and a party in the plaza before the game, and, a big event for the Bandits if they're able to win Game 1 in Albany and then have that opportunity to close it out at home on Saturday. If not, Game 3 will go back to Albany a week later. It is a little bit interesting. The Bandits are the lower seed here in the playoffs. They had the same record as Albany, but Albany beat them twice in the regular season at home and in Buffalo. And they have the home field advantage for this 3-game series, opening up in Game 1. But the Bandits are, at least according to DraftKings, favored by 1.5 goals in this game. And it's considered a bit of a David and Goliath matchup because of the Bandits having all of this postseason experience and being the defending champions and the hot run that they're on. They've won 7 in a row and 9 of their last 10. They have the 2 leading scorers in the league. Dane Smith and Josh Byrne are both MVP finalists. And there seems to be this belief that the Bandits are the team to beat. Albany's the youngest team in the league with 2 finalists for the Rookie of the Year and are in a really good goalie and the Coach of the Year. And they've had a strong season, but they were the worst team in the league a year ago. So it's kind of interesting to see how that plays out with who's really the favorite in this matchup and whether it'll be a sweep and an easy run to another championship for the Bandits or if it'll be more of a contested series.
What are we looking at in terms of crowds? I know that they've been good all season, but what are you noticing in terms of the playoff atmosphere? Is it this is a crowd that prides itself on its energy, the electricity, but as you're experiencing this as a journalist, covering it up from way up in the 300 level for those home games, have you noticed a difference?
Well, it's interesting. I haven't noticed a difference in the sense that it's always loud and energetic.
Yeah, it's not, again, that's not a knock. It's
Yeah.
that it's hard to maintain what these guys do.
Right. And so according to the numbers, the Sabres or the Bandits at Sabres PR announced a sellout for the last regular season home game, 19,000. The first playoff game in the quarterfinals had about 17,500, and they were about 16,500 for the home game they had in the semifinal round. So smaller numbers on attendance, but it didn't seem any smaller. It seemed like the same size crowd. It was the same energy, the same atmosphere, the same, electricity in the building, just as loud. Maybe there were less people up in the corners of the arena, but I didn't think that way. I was a little, I don't know if there was really 19,000 people there when they announced the sellout for that game, but it seemed like there were maybe more than 16,000 people for the game last week. So they're consistently drawing very close to a full building, if not a total sellout. I do believe they're still some tickets available. At least last I looked yesterday, there's also more tickets available on the secondary market. So it's not a hard and fast, no tickets available sellout, but I think it's going to get pretty close to being a sold out type crowd on Saturday, especially if the Bandits are to win Friday night and have that opportunity to close it out and win the championship Saturday night. I think anybody that considers themselves a Bandits fan or part of this Bandit land subculture is going to be there. And I always think at this time of the year, when the Bandits open up the season in December and the Sabres are playing and the Bills are playing, and it's college basketball and even college football still going on, I think it's tough to generate a lot of interest in the team and bring in more than the hardcore fans. But at this point in time, there's not much else going on. And if you're a casual Buffalo sports fan, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't be kind of captivated and want to be part of that audience. And if you have the opportunity to get into that game, I think you're going to enjoy yourself and enjoy the energy and the fan experience, regardless of whether the Bandits win or lose on Saturday.
Jonah, anything else before we get to Gene Kershner?
You got any thoughts on the Sabres finalizing their staff, bringing up Seth Appert, keeping Matt Ellis, and kind of?
Well, I anticipated Seth Appert being brought up. I think that a big part of the plan of Lindy Ruff is to be a bridge to Seth Appert, and I think they want him up here with the big club to learn from Lindy Ruff and to take over eventually. I also wouldn't be surprised if Lindy Ruff eventually takes over for Kevin Adams. The Matt Ellis thing, I mean, look, he and Kevin Adams are buddies. They go back a long ways. They're neighbors, literally. That happens sometimes. I mean, it happens in sports quite a bit. Just they wanted him around. It looks like Lindy was stuck with him. I don't know, but Kevin Adams contended that he spoke to a dozen or however many, 20 potential candidates, whatever. What was the number? Double digits. He didn't. I'm sorry.
Digits,
yeah. Double digits is what he said. I don't want to inflate it. Double digits in the span of 5 days in between firing Don Granato and hiring Lindy Ruff. But also in that point, he kept 2 assistant coaches that didn't seem to do a very good job, don't have a lot of NHL experience in terms of, especially never have no playoff experience in the NHL. And my theory at that time, when the Sabres announced that Granato was gone and the video coach and whatever other minor staff adjustment or dismissals were made in addition to Don Granato, I thought, well, Kevin Adams has already spoken to whoever the next coach is going to be, probably Lindy Ruff, and this is what Lindy Ruff wants. But then Kevin Adams said he didn't do that. He was talking to a bunch of coaches before he made up his mind. So if that's true, I would think it would be preferable that he had a talk with Lindy Ruff very early on, who said, I'll keep these guys. But if Kevin Adams wants us to believe that he did a thorough search, then this would indicate that Matt Ellis and Marty Wilford are foisted upon Lindy Ruff. And Kevin Adams said, we're keeping these guys, figure out what to do with them. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that seems to be the case. I mean, I guess I don't know if we'll ever really know. I think if this is who Lindy Ruff wants on his staff, then, I'd give it the benefit of the doubt that that's perfectly fine. But if there is any conflict or any disagreement between what Lindy Ruff wanted to do with his staff and what Kevin Adams wanted to do, I think that could create some fissures in the culture of the Sabres and some finger pointing if things don't go in the right direction this season. But I don't have any reason to believe that's not the case. I mean, Lindy Ruff has, he's worked with Matt Ellis before. He has familiarity with Matt Ellis. I think he's probably pretty aware of what Seth Appert did in Rochester and was paying attention to this playoff run. And I would think, has some approval. There's a
people like Matt Ellis, by the way. I mean, I know that we've criticized him for doing the power play and not having much experience and the track record and really where did this guy come from? Where's his coaching experience? But people like him. I have no doubt that Lindy Ruff enjoyed coaching him as a player. He was a grit guy, glue guy. I mean, the type of guy that, I've spoken to different people about him. I know Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's somebody who I was speaking to recently was talking about what a soldier he was as a player. Like so anyways, I just wanted to state that. I mean, I don't just want to just rag on Matt Ellis. I just think it obviously was a bad fit with him as the power play coach, but sorry.
No, right. And maybe in a different role. Maybe that's not a role that Matt Ellis wanted to be on the staff. And maybe he's going to be in a position where he's more comfortable and more able to utilize his skills. I think there's a widely held belief by many people that follow the Sabres that Seth Appert's a bit of a head coach in waiting, that, Lindy Ruff's on a 2-year contract and perhaps could be moved into a front office role eventually. And Seth Appert's going to be the future head coach of the Sabres, and that maybe the Sabres had to promote him and set up this succession plan in order to keep him from going to another franchise. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it's a informed theory that I think a lot of people have, and that's great if it works out. It could get awkward if things don't work out that well, or we get to this point 2 years from now and not everybody's in agreement that that's the way it's going to go forward. But Seth Appert's done a very good job with Rochester. Kevin Adams seems to be very happy with the way he developed that culture and built that program, and seems to have some hope that maybe the same thing can be done in Buffalo, and maybe he does like the idea of Seth Appert eventually being the Buffalo Sabres head coach, but for various reasons, some of them probably having to do with marketing and restoring faith from the fan base, Lindy Ruff is the right person for the job right now, then maybe Seth Appert is the right person for the job someday in the future.
One last point about the Bills schedule before we take a break and then come back with Gene Kershner. I did see a lot of bewilderment online yesterday that the Bills-Texans was not a primetime game. I'm not bewildered by that at all. In fact, I don't think it's worth a primetime game. The reason I say so is in Buffalo, it's a big deal to see Stefan Diggs again. Nationally, a guy who even on, let's say gets 10 targets that game, which would be a really busy day for Stefan Diggs. That's 10 plays in a game. That doesn't carry a broadcast. Stefan Diggs versus the Bills does not carry a broadcast. I'm sorry. It's interesting for us. It's interesting for Bills fans. It's probably not even that interesting for Texans fans. They're like, yeah, so what? I mean, think about all the players who've come to the Bills. We don't care about their rivalry, right? We don't care about who they are upset with on their other team, or like the Texans probably don't even give a shit. So Texans fans don't give a shit, really. Yeah. So anyways, the idea of a wide receiver carrying an entire broadcast, no, sorry, never, doesn't happen. Never would happen. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't have picked it as a primetime game, but to be stunned that it is not included after the Bills have 5 primetime games already, that they didn't get another one for Stefan Diggs Bowl, I thought was weird.
Yeah, it felt like it should have been a 4 o'clock game to me, maybe a bit because of where Houston is located in the time zone, and because it does seem maybe if it's not a primetime level game, as you just explained, it seems to be a little bit bigger than a regular 1 o'clock game. But
the AFC South in general is kind of like a dead zone. And this goes back to my time at ESPN, and we get the numbers, and I don't know what it is at the Athletic, but the AFC South is a weird division. It's expansion teams that have relocated, not deep roots. The Colts do well, but you get teams in transition. I don't know. Sorry, I interrupted you again. I
just mean that the NFL needs attractive games and games to promote at 1 o'clock too. It's not like the only games worth watching come on in prime time or 4 o'clock or on holidays. So I don't have a personal problem with any of the games not being in prime time. And if you look at the Bills' schedule, I think all of their primetime games are more attractive and more likely to be chosen for those time slots than this Bills Houston game. And if it wasn't for the Stefan Diggs factor, I don't think anybody would be predicting that game to be a primetime game. So, yeah.
Well, how about this? I mean, here's just another way to look at it. You know how sometimes you see, we used to see them more often, but I think they're still out there. They give you the map of the country and they tell you who's getting what game based on market. Bills Texans was not going to be all over that map. if you have a chance to choose it at 1 o'clock or, people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, give me Bills Texans. No, that's maybe a Thursday night game, maybe a good Thursday night matchup, but the Bills already have that. And if I'm a Bills fan, I don't want another Thursday night game. Give me the fewest number of Thursday night games possible. Okay. Jonah, thanks for this. Well, I don't want to feel like we're wrapping up, but at least that's good Bandit, Bills, Sabres talk before we talk about the Preakness with Gene Kershner coming up right after this message.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.
It's time to talk horse racing with the K from CTBK, Gene Kershner of the Buffalo News, and you can follow him at Equispace on Twitter. Gene, it is that week the week heading into the Preakness, but that interval in between the two closest legs of the Triple Crown, that being, of course, the first race, the Kentucky Derby, won by Mystik Dan in one of the most thrilling finishes you can come up with, a three-way photo finish. And now we have the Preakness coming up on Saturday at Pimlico in Baltimore. Gene, thanks for doing this. I feel like we missed an opportunity to talk about the Kentucky Derby. The schedules didn't quite line up. I'll take the blame for that. But what lessons were learned about the Kentucky Derby that can apply to the Preakness? And the reason I ask that is because I know that it's been a few years since even a horse that ran in the Kentucky Derby was able to win the Preakness. A lot of it has to do with the wear and tear and the quick turnaround. And of course, Mystik Dan, his people have said, ran a really hard race. So what are the main storylines heading into this second leg of the Triple Crown?
So I'd say there's probably two main storylines, obviously having a shot at a Triple Crown and the fact that it will be potentially down the thruway 4 hours at Saratoga, where the Belmont Stakes is being run this year based on the big renovation that's happening down in Belmont Park on the island. That's definitely number one. And as you mentioned, that we haven't had a horse win the first two legs since Justified did it in 2018 when he won the Triple Crown, making it very, very exciting and making those 3 weeks, amount of anticipation going into the Belmont. That's one. Number two, Mystik Dan, who won that three-way photo, the first three-way photo since 1947, which is amazing. And the first photo since 96 when Grindstone won the Derby. So it's been a long time since we've had a race that close, and being a couple hundred yards from the finish line and trying to figure out, which horse crossed the line first was pretty thrilling at the time, and to be there and to hear the anticipation of the crowd waiting for that photo finish to be announced. Well, Mystik, the second one being that the Preakness is run about 1/16 less than the Kentucky Derby, 1/16 of a mile less. So it's a little shorter of a race, and you could tell Mystik Dan was in control at that point in the race of the Derby pretty much, and it was that the two closing horses, the Japanese horse Forever Young and Sierra Leone, really coming late to try to catch him. And if there was another, those two had momentum coming at Mystik Dan. So he may have a better shot now at the shorter distance. And Kenny McPeak, his trainer, has said as much that should be very helpful to him, just having a little bit shorter race for him from, his pedigree, but he can obviously get the distance, but it definitely will help Pimlico.
In a perfect Preakness world, Mystik Dan is not the bettor's favorite heading into this race, and that, of course, is the bad news that because of a fever, Bob Baffert's Muth was scratched a few days ago. How big of a deal is that? Because obviously Muth was not able to run at the Kentucky Derby with Baffert serving his suspension in the state of Kentucky. Baffert's always that looming presence in the industry. And here was this horse that a lot of people thought and would have been a big player in Louisville, and then also were eager to see Muth perform. And now here, maybe things open up like they did for Brian Hernandez Jr. as he was able to break towards the rail. Maybe things are opening up a little bit, even a few days in advance for Mystik Dan.
Yeah, that's definitely a big event and moves Mystik Dan forward from the second favorite to the favorite in the race. He'll definitely be the bettor's choice now that Muth is out of the race. And Muth's owners sued the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission to run in the Derby and lost, and stuck with Baffert because they could have transferred that horse previously, and if they won the Santa Anita Derby or they won the Arkansas Derby, so they would have had enough points to get in. And that horse actually beat Mystik Dan in the Arkansas Derby, so he'd already beat him in a race coming into the Preakness. So definitely a factor. But Baffert's he's still looming in the background here because he's got another horse in the race, Imagination, who just dropped the Santa Anita Derby by a neck. So he's a formidable foe for Mystik Dan in this race, and he's on the outside, so he can get into position, early on in the race and make it more of a challenge. And Baffert's won the race 8 times. He pretty much owns the Preakness, so he'll be interesting to see how that horse performs.
Gene, as far as I know, you're not a horse doctor, and I'm pretty sure Jonah's not, but I also can't say for certain. We could call certified horse doctor and horse dentist Clint Malarchuk, former Sabres goalie, who actually works on horses out in Western Canada since his retirement. We could ask him. But in your experience covering the horses, a fever of 103, obviously a few days before the race, significant enough to scratch. What does that do for Muth's chances to come back and perform at the Belmont Stakes on, June 8th?
Yeah, I don't think he'll be out of training that long, so he could still rebound to run in the Belmont at Saratoga. I'm not a doctor either, or a trainer, so I'm not really 100% sure. But it's not as bad as an injury, which would probably take him out of training and out of that purview. And if he doesn't make the Belmont, there's the 2 summer races that come up not too far after that, which would be the Haskell at Monmouth, which is pretty big. It's grade 1, and the Travers obviously would be another one with a prep race at Saratoga, the Jim Dandy. So Baffert likes the Haskell better because it's he hasn't had the greatest track record at Saratoga. So he'll probably, take that route with Muth if they miss, because it's a little earlier. It's a week earlier than the Jim Dandy. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic now and in the 3-year-old division, especially if Mystik Dan doesn't win the race. It opens it up for a lot of the other contenders for the horse, the 3-year-old horse of the year.
Gene, Pimlico and Belmont Park are being, as I've read, torn down and rebuilt after this year. What kind of significance does that bring into these last Triple Crown races on the old tracks, and maybe what will be different going forward, do you think?
I think Pimlico will be skipping the 26 Preakness, and that'll be run at Laurel. So I think the plan there in Maryland is to start probably after next year's Preakness. So there's this one, and the next one may be the last one's run at the old grandstand. But I think for the most part, it's all for the better, because those facilities are both too massive. Belmont Park was massive. It only needed that grandstand one day a year. So they're really going to downsize it to, be more like a vintage baseball stadium, the smaller stadiums that, have, really cool, facilities within it. So I think that's going to be the main difference there. And it's going to be neat to go to, Saratoga. I think it's great. It's great for the next 2 years. I mean, it's the oldest um, sporting facility in North America. It's gonna run, the third leg of the Triple Crown. If we can have a Triple Crown there, it's gonna be crazy.
What about the idea of, I mean, could you ever move one of these races permanently? I think, because the name obviously matters, but the locations are so important. The Cleveland Browns can move to Baltimore and they just build a new stadium and it's still then they wait a couple of years and it comes back as the Cleveland Browns. Someday the Boston Red Sox are going to have to move out of Fenway Park and go find a new place. Now, of course, we're not changing cities, but could you ever see and of course you got these massive, massive commitments, 400 million for Pimlico, 450 million for Belmont Park. Churchill Downs just seems to be no, they're not throwing. You can't throw that amount of money. They are backing dump trucks and just dumping them onto Churchill Downs over the last, 10 years or so, to build everything from new spires to grandstands to what did you say before we hit the
new
record
paddock, the new $200 million paddock.
200 million just for the paddock. So obviously, but could you ever see, could one of these races ever move? And I'm guessing that the threat of that is probably what's making the state of Maryland give $400 million into this project. I don't know, but what's the state of these legendary races and their tie to the location?
I can't really see them, Tim, moving anywhere. I mean, the only other option would be maybe Santa Anita Park, and that could go by way of Hollywood Park, because that real estate is so valuable. They could sell that at some point. The thing that you hear more about is, will the Triple Crown schedule change? Because more and more times this second leg for the last few years, last year there's only one Derby horse that returned, and that was Mage, who won the Derby and had the Triple Crown still potential at stake. So it's really the argument that comes up every year, because a lot of trainers skip Preakness to run in the Belmont because there's a five-week window, which is typically what the training pattern is for horses running 4 weeks at a time, and spaced that way. So this year, though, we're kind of fortunate. We've got 3 horses returning from the Derby and 1 horse that ran on the undercard, who I like a lot, Seize the Gray, who won the Pat Day Mile on a race on Derby Day, that's now stretching out in distance for the legendary Dean Wayne Lucas, who has 2 horses in the race. And he has the other horse returning from the Derby, because Dean Wayne's an old school trainer and he run him right back 2 weeks. And it's a great thing. You could predict it every year that his horse is probably going to come back and run in the next race. So that's really the argument that's out there. Should the spacing change based on the training methods that are having in the Preakness? Has it become irrelevant, because not the only horse that comes back typically now in the last few years has been the Derby winner?
I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you before we get to your picks, and you just touched on both of them. D. Wayne Lucas at 88 with 2 horses in the field. But also just to talk about the Preakness and how it's kind of, and this is the way it's been. So it's not like we're talking about some unfortunate turn of events that is relatively recent, but the Preakness, wedged in as it is. What are your thoughts, Gene, on just the Preakness always being the Triple Crown? Is there going to be a Triple Crown winner race? And is that the identity of this race, and how fair is that? Because it never seems to stand alone. It is just kind of like, we're going to see what happens if we can duplicate what just happened at the Kentucky Derby, is kind of the Preakness's ID in so many ways that it's been kind of trapped in
It's
for
kind of
forever.
like the middle, Tim, it's like kind of like the middle child,
Right.
It's like, he's got to live up to the first child, who's, the Kentucky Derby, which is like what everybody watches. But, people tune into the Preakness just to see if it happens, right? If Mystik Dan can do it, it just generates more excitement. And wheeling it back in 2 weeks is difficult. That's why in history, there's only been 13 horses that have won the Triple Crown. So, and that's, the old loyalists to the Triple Crown schedule are going to say, well, that's why it's hard, to win the Triple Crown. And that's why it's, such a feat for these horses.
Yeah, I've always wondered if the folks at Pimlico just are like, God, why? Again, to use a horse racing metaphor, it's like being trapped in the pack. We can't get out, that we can't stand on our own. The Churchill Down, or the Kentucky Derby, I should say, is always going to stand on its own, especially when it's first. But yeah, you're just, you're trapped. So Dwayne Lucas, you already mentioned Seize the Gray. He hasn't won a Triple Crown race since 2013. He's 88 years old. Everybody loves him. One of the great men in the history of the sport. You could probably argue number one. What are the chances? And we seem to talk about it a lot. For 12 years. What are the chances this is Dwayne Lucas's chance this is his opportunity to get back into the winner's circle?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a shot with Seize the Gray. I'm not as sold on Just Steel, who did finish in front of Mystik Dan in the Arkansas Derby. He finished second, and Muth was first. And he kind of burned out up front at the Derby, and Dwayne will probably use a different tactic in the Preakness and not go out to the front with Just Steel, and probably run a different race with him. So, who knows what's going to happen there. Seize the Gray, I like, it's just, he ran a great Pat Day mile, and he was really moving forward in that race, and he had a good gallop out. So you could kind of tell that he wanted to do more. I saw him win at Saratoga in the slop last year on the Jim Dandy undercard. He broke his maiden that day at like 16-1. And my kid picked him. So it's like, geez, it's got in the back of my mind. I'm like, maybe there's some coincidence here. And someone's telling me that maybe that's the horse to go with. So I think he's going to be he's 21 morning line. That's before Muth scratched. So he may come down a little bit in price, but he's going to be a decent price. And I'm going to use him probably with Mystik Dan and the exactas and tries and in those types of bets. But it'd be cool for Lucas. I mean, I was there for the 2013 Oxbow win at the Preakness, and that was a neat moment. He's won this race 6 times, so he obviously knows Pimlico and he knows this race, and it would be his 15th Triple Crown win. It'd be a neat thing, and he's still getting on the pony. I've seen pictures of him, riding, next to Seize the Gray in the mornings at Pimlico, and he's just an old school trainer, and his methods have worked, and there's a lot of trainers that have come through him. Todd Pletcher, who's a Hall of Famer, doesn't have a horse of the race this year, but he's one of his progeny.
How unusual is that, Gene, that somebody like a Todd Pletcher doesn't enter a horse into a Triple Crown race, any of them? And I guess this is the layman obviously asking, maybe this is very common, but to me, every time I hear so-and-so doesn't have a race, when I tune in and I'm like, oh, so we didn't enter anybody. I'm like, that just seems weird to me.
It's interesting because Pletcher, even though he came out off the Lucas tree, he always skips the Preakness unless he's got the Derby winner.
Okay.
I don't think he's had one in there since Always Dreaming or Super Saver, the two Derby winners that he's had, and he skips it right to Belmont. He sticks with his training schedule, so he doesn't see the benefit. Plus, he's a NYRA guy, so he'd rather run it at Belmont and this year Saratoga. He only had one in the Derby this year. He's typically had up to 4 or 5 in the Derby in different years. Chad Brown, on the other hand, he's done well in this race, and he's won it twice since 2017 with cloud computing and early voting in the last couple of years. And he loves this race, so he'll bring in a horse to run in, and he's got one in it this year, Tuscan Gold, who's very interesting, is lightly raced, same as his 2 winners. This would be their 4th career race, and he trains them up, to this race as opposed to the Derby, where maybe his number 1 starter is in the Derby, and his number 2 he points to the Preakness.
All right, everybody, grab your pencils. We're now going to get some tips, some thoughts on what you should do at the window for the Preakness. Gene, of course, as I mentioned before, follow him at Equispace on Twitter and read his work at the Buffalo News. One of the great turf writers, I was going to say in the country, but if you're one of the great turf writers in the United States, you're one of the great turf writers in the world. And hey, you go to all these events, you're like, how many peers do you have, like, who are at every race? How many, I should say, I don't want to say, that's a little too highfalutin, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. How many colleagues do you have, Gene? How many of you out there are you that cover all the Triple Crown races and do all the the Breeders' Cup and everything that you cover?
From a newspaper standpoint, there's probably a handful. The trade pubs are there, for each of the races, and they'll send the different ones for each race. But
but not the same reporter though.
Yeah, not typically, but there'll be a couple that'll be there at every race.
That's like saying the athletics at every NFL game, but that doesn't mean I'm covering them all.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So it's nice of you to say that. Why don't we get to the picks?
Well, so here's the thing, Gene, is that come Sunday, people will have their actual quantified opinion as to how good Gene Kershner is, because you're going to give some picks. Where do you start when it comes to?
So in this race, it's like picking the winner, and I like Mystik Dan, based on the distance and his speed. He's probably the fastest horse in the race. But from a betting standpoint, I'll be boxing him probably with 2 or 3 other horses and trifectas, and then doing some straight exactas, or a 2-horse box with Seize the Gray, who I mentioned earlier. The other 2 horses I would mix in are Tuscan Gold, the Chad Brown horse that I mentioned, that he seems to have him ready for this race, and he's working well into the race. He's lightly raced. He's got the right pedigree. He's got Curlin on his Broadmare sire, who won the Preakness, especially if it comes up wet, which there is a chance of rain, in the forecast. And then the Baffert horse, Imagination. So those are my 4, that I'll have in the paper, in some order, but probably boxing with 4-horse trifecta box for $1, $24 for 50 cents. It's $12, so it's not a heavy bet. And if the higher priced horse like a Seize the Gray comes in first and second, it'll pay pretty decent. And then I'll probably play some Mystik Dan and Seize the Gray exactas.
Long shots are always fun. Do you have?
Yeah, I think Seize the Gray is my long shot. He's 20-1. So.
It's that. Okay. So well, I had it down at 15-1 based on my research from earlier, but that's still not. That's not a favorite.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. 15 to 20. Yeah, different. Yeah.
15 to 20. But he could go up to 20. Based on where the betting public comes in.
Since we're on Dwayne Lucas horse again, Just Steel. If you want, like you say, if you want to bet the feel good to see Dwayne get up on a horse, I don't know. Will he actually mount the horse in the winner's circle? That's just maybe he would at 88, because who knows? But
so
anyways,
paddock, he'll give a leg up, in the paddock to get his jock up there. He's got Rosario on Just Steel and Jamie Torres on Seize the Gray. So yeah, he'll be there. There's no doubt. He'll have his cowboy hat out and on and his cowboy boots, and he'll be ready. He'll be ready to roll. He'll be dressed to the nines, of course.
So Just Steel, is that dead money or what?
The only way I would only bet him with the Seize the Gray and a Lucas Exacta. Just you could spend $2 and $1 Exacta box and on a hunch play, and those two hit, you're gonna cash a big ticket. So it's worth a $2 bet.
I did have another general horse racing question for you, Gene, before we let you go. We always come out, we talk about the Triple Crown races. What is your favorite non-Triple Crown? And I'm going to include, let's throw the Belmont or the Breeders' Cup in there. What's your favorite race that isn't the casual fans race?
Are you saying it's not like a grade one or a big time? I mean, the Travers would be the non-Triple Crown race that I'd love to cover, but
right.
That's it's
Santa Anita Derby. I don't know, the Queen's Plate.
It's called the Midsummer Derby. So the Travers at Saratoga would definitely be it. And I've had some pretty good fortune picking that race too. So that also makes it a favorite of mine. And it's right down the thruway, and I love to cover it.
Soft spot in Gene's heart whenever you can pick the winners.
Absolutely.
Jonah, before we wrap, any questions for Gene?
Yeah, I'd just like to get Gene if he's got a prediction on the NLL Cup finals, because I know if you weren't covering the horses this weekend, you might be following that.
Let's go Bandits.
You think it'll be a sweep, or will we have a game 3
sweep
next week?
And I hope my Albany friend Mike McAdam watches this podcast, because they're going to sweep Albany.
He covers them, huh?
No, he'll be with me at the Preakness.
Oh, I see. But would he? Doesn't he cover him?
Yeah, he covers some college lacrosse. I don't think he's covered.
Oh, all right. He's not doing that.
What do they call it? The Firebirds? I don't even know what they're called.
Firewolves.
Firewolves. Yeah, it's close.
Well,
I think the Firebirds are the UFL team or whatever they have. Yeah.
Well, there's a testimonial for the National Lacrosse League.
Well, I know about the Rock.
Two guys who have covered
Storm.
them. I'm sorry, a guy who's a fan and a guy who covers them, saying what they think the nickname of the other team in the game in the series is.
Yeah.
Gene, huge sports fan that you are. Like, we have you here. Your
Sure.
thoughts on the Bills, the schedule, the offseason, Stephon Diggs, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think Diggs, good riddance. I think they're waiting for next year to replace him.
Right.
But who knows? MVS or Claypool, maybe these guys resurrect their career in Buffalo with Josh.
I imagine I'll use this metaphor in a story, but to me, the Bills wide receiver room looks like the kitchen drawer that's got all the stuff that you just throw in it, that one kitchen drawer, and there's a mishmash of stuff, but when you need to get something done, it's probably in there.
Probably in there
It
somewhere.
might be a knife to open up something dangerous. It's a old nickel to scratch off a lottery ticket, or a needle. Who knows what's in there? An old John Subs menu. That's the Bills wide receiver room right now.
From a schedule standpoint, I don't know. I kind of like the end of the schedule with the Jets and the Patriots 2 games, because I think they've had some pretty solid success with sweeping the last few games of the season for the last 4 or 5 years, and we may need those games. So I kind of always look at the start of the schedule and the end of the schedule to see what's going to happen. I think their bye week falls in a good spot with San Francisco after that, so they can be rested and really prepared for that game. I was really hoping the LA game was around the Breeders' Cup so I could be out there, to have a drink with you guys. But
any road games circled that you will be attending?
Baltimore's one of my favorite cities because I'm an Orioles fan, so that's one. But it's a Sunday night game, so that makes it a little bit more difficult to get to.
It's early enough though that you could there could be an Orioles double dip possibility.
Could be a playoff game. I went to game 1 and 2 with my daughter last year and had a blast. And ended up in the Billy Joel concert was there, but in between the games, which was great, at the Raven Stadium. So that was fun.
Can you get us out to any of these games on the CTBK jet?
The Lear?
Yeah.
Well, it's taking me to Preakness this weekend. So,
yeah. Gene, thanks for this as always. I'm sure everyone's going to get filthy rich and not have to listen to the next episode of Tim Graham and Friends because they will have made so much money off the Preakness and your picks. So we'll just go ahead and thank them for having been listeners because they just won't have time to listen to podcasts given all their money that they're going to be spending going off to different countries. Although you can listen to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants, in the Grand Cayman Islands, in Switzerland, wherever your money takes you, in Monaco. You can download us and listen to us there also. So I guess maybe I jumped the gun with that little bit of analysis, just assuming that this new money will drive them away from the podcast.
If somebody makes money out these picks, they should reinvest back into the podcast with sponsorship, and might need to launder that money, and we can maybe help them with that.
That's a great idea. It's like when you win a charity, like 50-50 raffle and you give it back, or, you win the raffle and give all these things. Yeah. These little things that you should do. You're right, John. Gene, any parting words before you leave for Baltimore?
good luck, everyone. I hope you do well in your bets. And if you take my advice, I hope you do really well.
Gene Kershner at Equispace. Follow him there on Twitter. Read his work in the Buffalo News. Thanks, Gene. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.